Ginsburg really did change the judicial landscape, the legal landscape for women in tremendous ways. And that was true before, notorious RGB and, all of this strange adulation late in her life that became sort of, I don't know, in meme space. She really was out there saying, and this, part of the reason I read specifically the quotes that I did is her recognition of, without specifying what they might be, of population level differences between men and women. And her recognition that under the law, we must be treated equally because for any overlapping to normal distributions, for any trait, there will be, extraordinary men and what's the opposite of extraordinary?
Lackluster.
No, lackluster is not the opposite of extraordinary. Incompetent men, and there will be extraordinary women and incompetent women. And the idea that, in the case of VMI, and I don't actually know, I don't exactly know where I fall between these two opinions on this, because this was a public institution that for over 150 years had been male only. And the argument was that it was effectively a kind of a militarized education that was not mostly training people for the military. Only about 15% of the students at VMI apparently went into the military. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg's point was women. There are many women, although probably not as many as there are men. I don't know that she says that, but my statistical brain goes like, okay, there will be many women, although not as many as there are men, who would benefit from and enjoy and be educated by this kind of education. And especially if the argument is not that we are training soldiers, which is a kind of a different argument potentially, although obviously women are now also acting as soldiers, then basically what VMI proposed to do was to create a separate women's institute, which of course did not have, you create something from scratch in 1995 or whatever, and it's not going to have the history and the connections, and it's obviously a second-rate solution.
Well,
right?
It's a separate but equal phenomenon, which of course results in a separate but unequal result.
Right, exactly. And so, are there not arguments for single-sex spaces? Yes. Single-sex educational spaces? Probably. Like both you and I have actually attended single-sex educational spaces. Me by choice for 5 weeks.
I'm
college.
Almost over it at this point.
And you in junior high and high school, until they politely asked you to leave and you came to the school where I was, and we met.
They invited me to leave.
Invited you to leave. Was it polite though?
It was a kind of an elite school, so they were very polite and diplomatic and euphemistic in their invitation for me to get the fuck out. So anyway,
so both of us I have only 5 weeks experience at a women's college, and you have 4 years of experience from a lot longer ago. Well, actually not that much longer ago, but when you were still definitely a child, right?
Let's put it this way: exactly the wrong moment to be isolated from girls. It was not.
I think it worked out for you, okay?
Oh, it did in the end, but that really has more to do with the getting kicked out at the right moment than the being there in that stifling institution.
Yeah, but so you who had who really never felt like there were benefits to you being in a single-sex educational environment between the ages of grades of 7 and 10. Can you explain why, at say the college level, there might be benefits to an all-male environment?
Of course,
right. So do so.
Well, let's just say, I don't think the benefits are net in general. On the other hand, the consequence, well, unfortunately, any such analysis would be largely predicated, unless we're talking about an education with a physical component. And even then you have to push it fairly far before you get to a place where there really needs to be separation. So any argument that is not based in physical differences in average capacity between men and women would be largely predicated on a heteronormative viewpoint, which would be unfair to impose on this. So in some sense, maybe the answer is any explanation has dissipated.
You lost me at heteronormative viewpoint.
I'm sorry. Yes.
You want to do that? Really?
Sure.
Are you serious?
Well, I am, in the sense that there are places where, let's just cut to the chase.
Okay.
Let's say...
Because I know you've noticed, but the world is actually heteronormative.
Well, there's heteronormative, and there's the expectation that everybody falls under that
So
rubric.
this then is, again, the population versus individual level expectation. Like, obviously, the vast majority of the world is heterosexual, which is what the hetero and heteronormative refers to.
Right.
And that recognizing that is different from therefore saying that all the world must be and all individuals in it must be, and anything veering from that is somehow off or wrong or not okay. So these two things are both true, and this is again exactly the distinction between populations and individuals, which somehow most people seem to have a very, very hard time of holding those two things, those two concepts in their heads at the same time. Men and women are on average different, and men and women as individuals should be engaged with as the individuals they are, with their particular strengths and weaknesses, which may well be different than you would expect based on the diagnosis of your male or your female.
So we have arrived at what I suspect is one of the 5 most important principles in the entire universe.
Wow.
Yep.
Let's do it. Okay.
The principle is something like a highly functional system requires discretion applied by sober minds, right? And so what you've outlined, which I think is perfect for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is that she was deploying a very enlightened understanding of equality, right? Mm-hmm. It's exactly what we've been arguing for here, which is that equal rights is a highly desirable thing that should be defended vigorously, but that does not mean that we're the same, right? And that these two things, while a naive person may conclude that one has to be true for the other to be true, an honest broker will recognize that they can't possibly both be right, and that the desire to protect people equally is actually unrelated to the similarity of those people. Men and women don't have to be the same phenomenon, and we don't have to be suffering from an oppressive viewpoint that has been inflicted on us that separates men from women in order to protect men and women well. But what that means is that you do get to a spot where you have to acknowledge that actually here is one of the places where difference matters. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Well, and it gets dicey. Right. So in an educational environment, which is in part, even if it's not the majority, training men historically for military duty, the presence of the introduction of a small number of women is going to change the dynamic. It 100% is. And so this is one of the many, many ways in which sex is not like race. And so, when we talk about whether or not, I don't even know when it happened, but, were Black soldiers allowed into the army to fight in World War II? And that's probably the wrong moment in history.
They were, but often grouped together.
And, but, there never should have been any reason at all to protect, in quotes, white soldiers from Black soldiers. That's wrong. That's insane. There is nothing in soldiering, in being a human, that is different in that regard with between races, right? But men and women is different, because this is a distinction that is 500 million years old in our lineage alone, and so it does change the dynamic. And I say that as someone who has benefited from the ability of women to move into spaces that have been historically male, and some of those spaces, they weren't legitimately historically male, but some, like the military, may well function better without there being a small number of women present in every situation.